Wait a second. Just need to adjust. Okay, so.
Hi, I'm Patrick Leblond. I'm a professor at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa. I'm here in Victoria for a conference on the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA. And I've been asked to comment on comments that have been made by one of the participants here, Professor Rick Harris from Simon Fraser University here in British Columbia, about his views on CETA. And basically he argues that it's not really a worthwhile agreement because the benefits of the agreement would be so marginal, and that a lot of actually efforts by governments, businesses would be spent on trying to take advantage or like realize such an agreement, and maybe we should invest our resources in deepening our relationship with the United States or developing our ties with Asia. So it is true that in the grand scheme of things, the benefits are actually, yes, marginal. We're not talking about increasing Canadian growth or Canadian GDP by 5-10%. It's actually less than 1%. But what we're talking about is potentially something along the lines of between 10 and 20 billions, at least these are what the economic studies show. And if you think about 10 to 20 billion dollars more into the Canadian economy, that represents a significant amount of jobs, a significant amount of additional wealth to the economy. Another argument, in a way, against CETA is the fact that between Canada and the EU, the average tariffs are around 2-3%. So you're not really reducing much if you eliminate those. That may be true on average, but there are still many sectors, many products where those tariffs are much higher than that. They can be in the order of 10-20%, in some cases much more. So for those companies, for those industries, it can represent a significant benefit for them just reducing those tariffs in terms of having a greater access to or cheaper access to the European market. And vice versa. Let's not forget that a lot of Canadian companies import all sorts of products and services from the European Union in order to, in a way, be more competitive, not necessarily only in the Canadian market, but in the US market, in Asian markets. And if we have that advantage, in a way, a better competitive advantage, well, this is something that we will benefit from. So it's not just in a way about exports to the EU, but also about imports into the EU. Then if it means more investment because we have this agreement, well, this is another benefit. And we know that EU firms are actually the second largest investors in Canada. Canadian firms are one of the most important investors in Europe. So again, if we have easier access, more cooperation, less barriers to trade and investment between our economies, we will benefit from that. So, the estimate of 10-20 billion might be at the low end, providing that we take all the efforts to actually realize and implement the agreement. If we think in terms of public procurement, which, government public procurement, EU firms could actually compete in the Canadian market, similarly for Canadian firms in the European market. Ultimately, it means means new opportunities. It could also mean less lower costs for, let's say, Canadian taxpayers. It can mean more choice. We've heard about corruption, for instance, in the construction industry in Quebec. Maybe if we had more European firms competing, there would be less corruption, and everyone would benefit, except maybe the corrupt ones. But that's all right. There are a lot of, on average, yes, maybe the gains are not that big, but when you start looking at certain industries, when you start looking at the opportunities, which are very difficult to determine right now because they may only present themselves in the future, then yes, it might not seem worthwhile. But when you think about well, the European Union is the largest market in the world. It is actually a very innovative, very advanced economy. There is growth there. A lot of people say, oh, well, there's no growth in Europe. Well, it had a crisis, but it's coming out of the crisis, and it will come out stronger and better and more productive. And there are also new economies coming in the EU, in Central and Eastern Europe, that will grow faster, and we should take advantage of that. And having CETA will place us there. And if we don't do it, and let's say the Americans have their own agreement with Europe, which they're negotiating currently, then we're just going to fall behind and in a way miss the bus, and our companies are going to be hurt. We've seen it in Korea, where both the EU and the US signed agreements with South Korea when Canada did not have one. We've just recently signed one, but Canadian firms were actually priced out of that market, and now we're going to play catch up. So, one has to see these things in a much larger context than just, well, what does it mean as a percentage of Canadian GDP, for example. So I'm all in favor of CETA. Thank you.